Easton, the other tank engine. Many engines have come and gone on the island of Sodor. For some, their time on the railway was so short that other engines would be forgiven to have forgotten them. This is a story about one of those engines. It happened shortly after Thomas had earned his branch line. It had been a few days since James's bootlace incident. He was still shut up in the shed as punishment and was desperate to come out, but neither the Fat Controller or any crews came near him. Despite James's absence, none of the engines were strained from extra work. There were still many loaned engines from other railways. Some would only stay a day, while others could be around for a whole month. A more recent visitor was a tank engine from East Anglia. With Thomas having a new responsibility, the Fat Controller was quick to find a new shunter for the big station. The engine's name was Easton, a small dark blue tank engine with 6 wheels. Compared to most tank engines at the time, he looked very stylish. "I've arranged to have you here for the next 2 weeks, the Fat Controller said. "If you do well, I'll be more than happy to have you a part of my railway." Easton felt very excited and was eager to please. He arranged the coaches gently and hurried about the yards with heavy trucks. The bigger engines didn't say much to him, but they did appreciate that there was another engine to sort their trains. All that said, his overall attitude left much to be desired, and it became apparent on one particular day. It had been a week since his arrival, and Easton was busy shunting a long goods train for the other end of the line. As he came to a stop, he noticed a bright red engine that he had never seen before standing by the coal bunkers. He steamed up to Edward, who was nearby. "Oi, Edward," he huffed. "Who's that over there?" "Oh, that would be James," replied Edward. "Seems the Fat Controller has finally let him out." "Let him out? What do you mean? Was he stuck in the shed or something?" Edward chuckled. "Yes, well, it's a bit of a story." Once Edward had explained everything about the bootlace, Easton felt like he was going to wheeze with laughter. "Even so," continued Edward, "it's best not to keep reminding him of it. I'm sure he wants to make up for it, and be really useful." Edward puffed away. Easton did listen to what Edward said, but when he shunted James's goods train alongside him, he couldn't hold it in. "Here are your tracks, James," he said. "Have you got some bootlaces ready?" And he ran off, laughing, much to James's frustration. During his first week, Easton had come to understand most of the Fat Controller's engines. The one exception was the station's former shunter. He was curious to know who he was, and why exactly his position changed. Later that day, Easton was having a small rest near the carriage shed, when he heard an unfamiliar whistle. To his surprise, there, pulling into the station, was another blue tank engine. He was around the same size as Easton, and had 2 coaches in tow. Adding to this, they were filled with passengers, meaning he wasn't shunting a train, but pulling one. That evening in the sheds, Easton was quick to question Edward about it. "That would be Thomas," he explained. "He used to shunt coaches like you, but now he has his own branch line." "His own branch line?" exclaimed Easton. "But he's a tank engine like me. How can he get to pull trains and I can't?" "Because Thomas earned his branch line," grumbled Gordon, who was trying to rest. "It was an award for rescuing James from his crash." "But it's not fair. I've worked in yards for years. I deserve to pull trains after all that." "Well, the world isn't quite that simple," retorted Gordon. You want something, you work for it. Oh, please be quiet. And with that, he shut his eyes and went to sleep. Calm down, Easton, whispered Edward. If you're patient and continue your good work, I'm sure the Fat Controller will give you other jobs. But Easton had no interest in patience, and I'm sorry to say that after that night, he would let his jealousy get the better of him. It was very apparent the next day. Easton was rushing about the yards and was very rough with the trucks. This wasn't too unusual, but when he began taking his anger out on the coaches, workmen and engines became concerned. Eventually, the Fat Controller had to step in and spoke to Easton. I don't know what's got you so riled up, he said sternly, but I'd prefer you keep it to yourself. Easton did calm down a little after that, but he couldn't help feeling envious whenever he saw Thomas pass by. He tried to take his mind off of it by bringing all his attention to the shunting, but it did little good. A few days later, Easton was having a rest. His driver and fireman had gone to have some tea in the workers' hut, leaving him completely alone. Just then, the yard foreman walked up to him. Excuse me, he said, but when your crew returns, could you not bring Thomas's coaches to the station? Why? Asked Easton. Oh, he's just having a bit of trouble steaming up. Should be fine, though he may be leaving a little late. If you get his coaches sorted, that will save some time. Must be off now. And he hurried away to his office. He was so quick that he didn't notice the grin appearing on Easton's face, as he had an idea. He had thought it all through just as his crew returned. Driver, he called innocently. The foreman came over earlier. He asked us to take Thomas's passenger train. The driver stared. You sure? He replied. Yes, it seems Thomas isn't steaming well and won't be ready in time, so we'll have to take it instead. The driver and fireman had doubts, but knowing how important the branch line trains are, there was little time to think it over. So, they set off for the carriage sheds. Thomas's coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, were very surprised to see a different blue tank engine buffering up to them. Who are you? Cried Annie. Hello there, my name's Easton. Thomas isn't available at the moment, so I'll be your engine today. Before the coaches could reply, they were already out of the siding and off towards the station. At the platform, Easton watched with eagerness as the passengers boarded the train. Oh, this feels wonderful, he thought. Finally a whole train to myself. As soon as the guard blew his whistle, Easton hurried out of the station, very unsmoothly. Easton was enjoying himself immensely. Buildings and fields blurred by, and he adored the cool breeze. The coaches and passengers, however, were having a different experience. Slow down, cried Annie and Clarabelle. We'll fly off the rails at this speed. Nonsense, snapped Easton. I'm just keeping to time. The driver fought to control his engine, but it was no good. They continued at a fast and dangerous speed. It wasn't long till the first station came into view. That's enough, Easton, yelled the driver. We have to stop now. Easton's brakes came on, and after much squeaking and squealing, they finally came to a stop, but not before overshooting the station platform. Oh, you stupid engine, scolded the driver. Easton gulped. His confidence had dashed. Once they had backed up, the passengers stormed out of the train, feeling very sick and very cross. First that red engine and now this, exclaimed the man. What is it with this ridiculous railway? Easton tried to speak up, but the constant buzz of furious voices drowned him out. Soon, the station master phoned the yards, and after a quick conversation, addressed the passengers. "Everyone, may I please have your attention? My sincere apologies for what has happened. Another engine is on their way to take over the train." Now, Easton was even more nervous. He was certain who that engine would be. And sure enough, pulling up alongside him was a red-faced tank engine. "Oh, hello, Thomas, is it?" stuttered Easton. "I don't believe we've had a proper chance to meet." "What do you think you're doing?" bellowed Thomas. "Who do you think you are to steal my train and try to run on my branch line?" His face went even more red when he saw the sorry state the coaches were in. "And what have you done to Annie and Clarabelle? They need to be treated with the utmost care and respect. Seems like you don't even know what those words mean." "All right, Thomas, that's enough," interrupted the station master. He then turned to Easton. "As for you, uncouple from the train and return to the yards at once." Without a word, Easton did just that. When he arrived at the yards, he found the Fat Controller waiting for him. "I had high hopes for you," he began. "You showed great potential when you started here. Even after you started acting rough, I thought you had settled down once I had a word with you. And then you do this. I spoke with the foreman before you returned. He made it very clear that you were told to just shunt Thomas's train, not take it out." The driver was surprised. "But sir, Easton told us we had to take the train, because Thomas couldn't." "So you lied as well," boomed the Fat Controller. "I'm sorry, sir," said Easton. "I only wanted to take my own train, and when I saw another tank engine do it, I got jealous." "And that is the very reason why you're far from ready to pull any train," retorted the Fat Controller. "Thomas can have little patience too, but he has great respect for coaches and his passengers. Perhaps one day you'll learn that, but you will not be learning it here. Arrangements have already been made. You will return to your railway tomorrow morning. For now, I want you in the sheds out of the way. Is that clear?" "It is, sir," whispered Easton, and he rolled away, feeling miserable. The following morning, Easton left the Island of Sodor behind. No one said goodbye, or at least saw him off. Not that he minded, of course. He felt very ashamed, but knew deep down that the Fat Controller was right. There was a lot to learn, indeed.